last 2 days of class. Today's the first one. We're going to be reviewing Hamlet for the final exam next Monday and Tuesday. Okay, I haven't been drinking anything seriously. Okay. Everything's moving in slow motion today. All right. There we go. 19. That is not good. Wow, it's connected. Okay. Are the schools there yet? You guys present? Hard to tell.
Lorenzo's here.
Good morning. How's it going today? We got 2 classes in the final.
It's good.
All right, it's good. It's glad to hear. I'm good too. Except now I have to grade research papers, so that's what happens when you teach English and you teach writing. So what we're going to do today is we're just going to start reviewing today and Wednesday for the final exam. Okay? Fair enough with y'all? Shouldn't be a problem?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. There's Smire. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
I got tickled at how many people said, I can't find where to turn my research paper in. Okay. That's why there were announcements to help out. Because I'm like, okay, folks. I know I have all the Hamlet stuff. I have multiple folders, so trying to cut down on the number of things. So, and obviously still maybe have too many. Let's go finish. When we were doing the reading questions, did we do any after? Have we done Act 3, or did we only get through Acts 1 and 2? Do we remember? And there comes Crosbyton. Normally they are first ones in, so that's unusual. I'm just going to start with Act 3 reading questions. I'm also going to open up. I'll do the notes and quotes after we get done. This is just to maybe clear up any confusion. And of course, I may find out about that confusion when I read your papers, right? Okay. I'm just going to start with Act 3, the questions. Hopefully you have copies of those. Okay. Act 3 begins on page 1145 in your textbook. And here are the questions. The first one is, what do Rosencrantz and Guildenstern report about Hamlet to the king and queen? Well, basically it's that he's kind of crazy, but he really won't tell us why. They actually say, in about line, Guildenstern says, nor do we find him forward to be sounded, but with a crafty madness keeps aloof when we would bring him onto some confession of his true state. So they say he doesn't really seem to be really crazy, but he does, there's a madness about him. So that probably reinforces the king's notion that Hamlet's not crazy. Second question, why does Polonius tell Ophelia to pretend to be reading a book of devotions? Well, it looks a lot more natural to accidentally stumble into somebody if you're doing something, instead of lurking there, leaning up against the castle wall. Hey, Hamlet, how's it going, to make it seem more natural so that he won't suspect that he's being watched. But we already know that's one of the whole points in here is people are constantly spying on each other. What bitter advice does Hamlet give Ophelia? In this scene he says, get thee to a nunnery, which is probably one, interestingly enough, totally omitted from the Mel Gibson version. But he says it, I think, 4 or 5 times to her in this scene. The only time you get it, I think, is in the wrong scene in the Mel Gibson version, which is kind of sad. But get thee to a nunnery is basically stay away from men, or playing off of the slang term for a brothel as a nunnery. Go either be the whore or be the saint. I guess there's no in between for women in Hamlet's mind. After secretly observing Hamlet and Ophelia, does the king agree with Polonius that Hamlet suffers from love madness? And that is on page 1148. He says, love, his affections do not that way tend, nor what he spake, though it lacked form a little, was not like madness. There's something in his soul over which his melancholy sits on brood, and I do doubt the hatch and the disclose will be some danger, meaning for himself, which for to prevent, I have in quick determination thus set it down, he shall with speed to England for the demand of our neglected tribute. And Polonius disagrees with him, of course. Polonius says, no, but yet do I believe the origin and commencement of his grief sprung from neglected love. So there's an argument in there. Why does Claudius decide to send Hamlet to England? Well, Hamlet is much more popular with the people than Claudius is. He is the son of a beloved king. He's young and not this old guy, and so he sees him as a threat, a potential threat to his throne. And you can't just do something to him in Denmark. You have to give him a purpose. You have to get him out of town, out of the situation, with a reason. And so his madness does give Claudius the reason to send him to England. And then you get later on, that leads to Act 4, when the clowns, they call them, though they're technically gravediggers, laughingly say, well, if he goes to England and they don't cure him, it's not a problem because everybody's mad in England anyway. So, but you send him there to get him out of the situation, to remove this possible danger to you. And Claudius ends that particular scene with, madness and great ones must not unwatched go. Okay, next up, we've got, what final plan does Polonius devise in order to reveal the source of Hamlet's behavior? That he is going to go hide in the queen's bedroom for the interview between the two of them. It's kind of sad. But he still wants to prove that Hamlet is crazy with rejected love. So scene 2 goes, what instructions does Hamlet give Horatio prior to the staging of the play? He says, whatever you do, keep your eyes on the king, because his reaction is what we're looking for. And what do the players pantomime? They pantomime the actual, the pantomime is the play within the play. The pantomime is called the Mousetrap. And it is the king and the queen in the garden, and the king lays down to take his nap, the queen leaves, and then the nephew comes in and murders him. Which is interesting that there's this little bit of irony that in the Mousetrap, it's the nephew of the king who kills the king, and that's what Claudius fears. So there's kind of this whole interesting, odd little twist. He fears that his nephew is going to kill him so that he can take the throne. So it's kind of a smart idea on Shakespeare's part to do that. And how is this different from the play that follows? In the pantomime, the queen succumbs to the new suitor's, attractions. In the play that follows, the queen rejects and refuses to fall in love with anyone else. And that's the murder of Gonzaga. So that's what is the play within a play's title, The Mousetrap, and how does the king react to the play? Well, basically and I thought the movie did a really nice job of this. Light, turn on the light, stop the play. You can see him visibly reacting to everything that he's seen. And most of us, when we are confronted with something we've done wrong, we do tend to react to it. Our first thing is that, no, I didn't do it, but, the king has already had some time for that. And then what message do Rosencrantz and Guildenstern deliver to the Hamlet? Sounds like a whole different story. To Hamlet from the queen, that she wants to see him in her room. And immediately, and his response is, by and by, I'll get there. But that's also where he says, do you think to play me like a flute? And he gets really upset with Guildenstern, where he shoves the little recorder flute around his throat. But I like that, by and by, is easily said. That's what he says. And then you've got, what do Rosencrantz and Guildenstern think is the explanation for Hamlet's odd behavior? They really don't have one. They still don't. And maybe just the stress of being a person of high position might possibly be part of it. Okay, so scene 3 then. What orders does the king give to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern? He basically says, you will be taking Hamlet to England. And this is one of those tricky situations when that occurs. They are in, he says, I'm going to send you to England with him. The terms of our estate may not endure hazard, so nears as doth Alory grow out of his brows. In other words, Hamlet's now a threat to the throne of Denmark. We're going to send him to England with you guys. And he says, the king tells him on 11:58, arm you, I pray you, to the speedy voyage, for we will fetters put about this fear, which now goes too free-footed. And they leave. Polonius says something, I'm going to go hide in his mother's closet. Behind the arras, I'll convey myself to hear the process, the questioning of hers. And the king says, thanks, my dear lord, and Polonius is gone. And that's when you get the king, a second confession of the king in a soliloquy. Well, that Hamlet is kind of listening in on, oh, my fence is rank, it smells to high heaven. It hath the primal eldest curse upon it. That's a reference to the highest. The primal eldest curse would be the murder, Cain of Abel. So that's a reference there. Biblical allusion, a brother's murder. Pray can I not, though inclination be as sharp as will. And he goes on for a little bit. And he goes, he says something, I gained all these things, and so how can I be punished when I've gotten everything that I wanted? He goes, what then, what rest? Try what repentance can, what can it not? Yet what can it when one cannot repent? So we think when we first read that speech, and we don't get hardly any of that in the Gibson version. When we first read the speech, you think, oh, he's repenting. And that's what Hamlet thinks is the whole time. Hamlet can't hear what is being said in this scene. He's just outside of the room. And so he thinks Claudius is saying, oh, I'm so sorry I killed my brother, and that's why he doesn't want to kill him, because, if he kills him and he's repented of his sins, then he goes to heaven. But he stares in there, he says, he goes, help angels, make us say, bow stubborn knees and heart with strings of steel, be soft as sinews of the newborn babe, all may be well. Then you get Hamlet saying, oh, I would kill him, but I can't do it right now. And then at the very last thing, the king says, my words fly up, my thoughts remain below. Words without thoughts never to heaven go. So you find out that, no, Claudius is not that repentant of his sins. And so why doesn't he kill him? I answered the next one there. Does Claudius have a conscience? Yes, but not a very strong one. And we see, obviously, I told you why he associates himself with Cain. Scene 4 then takes us to Polonius. He hides behind the queen's curtain so that he can overhear the conversation, so that they're not trusting Gertrude to tell them the full truth about what happens. This is a mother who loves her son maybe too much. That sounds like what's this guy? Maury Povich's show, mothers who love their sons too much. So the only way that he can truthfully know what happens and prove what he wants to be is to listen to it himself. Because whatever he hears, he's going to interpret it to be what he wants it to mean. Don't we tend to do that when we're trying to prove something out? We have an idea what we're going to prove, and so whatever we hear, we will interpret it that way, which is probably what Polonius was going to do. But we find out that this was one time he shouldn't have been over listening. And so she does know that he's there. Hamlet enters Gertrude's chamber. She starts to scold her son. Why does she soon cry for help? Well, in the movie, they have Hamlet stick the sword. He puts his sword to her throat, and she says, what wilt thou do? Thou wilt not murder me. And she cries, help! Oh! And behind the arras, of course, Polonius says, what ho, help! And now Hamlet, hearing somebody behind the tapestry, goes, how now, a rat dead for a ducat, dead. And he thrusts his rapier through the arras. This is on page 1160. And Polonius in the play says, oh, I am slain. Okay, he falls and dies. And the queen says, oh, what have you done? So it gets a little murky there. Hamlet kills Polonius because he thinks it's the king. Now, interestingly enough, there has to have been some passage in time then between 3.3, or Act 3, Scene 3, and Act 3, Scene 4, for Claudius to have gotten to the chamber. For one thing, when you have them following one on the other, he just saw his stepfather, uncle, in that chamber confessing his sin, supposedly. How did he beat him to the mother's bedchamber? But everything in the movie has it seem to be just this one continuous, smooth thing. But there has to be a little bit of time, else why would he think it was Polonius? How does Hamlet react when he sees Polonius's body? Oh, he has this wonderful speech about, I took thee for thy better. It's down on the bottom of 1160. It's line about 33. Thou wretched, rash, intruding fool, farewell, I took thee for thy better. Take thy fortune, thou find'st to be too busy, is some danger. Leave wringing of your hands. This he says to his mother. His portraits, does Hamlet show Gertrude? It's a portrait, one's a portrait of King Hamlet, one's a portrait of Claudius. And so he says, compare them. See what the first one was. And then you married this poor, not very well copied image. And the counterfeit presentiment of two brothers is an interesting way to say, look at these two small pictures. And so what he's showing are not photographs. That's one of the things that I have to make clear. We don't have photographs until the mid-1850s or so, not readily available. So these would have been small-handed painted miniatures. You know, Hamlet's wearing a huge one with his father on it. She's got a smaller one with Claudius on it. And he holds them up in the movie and he says, look at this. These are two guys and there's nothing. You know, this is just something that's not even halfway as good as this one. And which is why in many versions they have the character of Claudius and the character of King Hamlet played by the same person. And it makes it a little more intriguing. Maybe it also gives an explanation for Gertrude's so soon marriage of the brother after the one dies. So he does this, though, to show her how that's part of the reason. He says, "O shame, where is thy blush? If thou canst mutine in a matron's bones, to flaming youth let virtue be as wax and melt in her own fire." There is no excuse. You're a middle-aged woman. You shouldn't be that lustful for someone. So, you know, and the queen says, "O Hamlet, speak no more. Thou turnest my eyes into my very soul, and there I see such black and grained spots as will not leave their color." When the ghost appears in Gertrude's room, how does she react? She's like, "I think he's mad." She's saying to Hamlet, "I think you're mad." And because she doesn't see it. So what does the ghost tell Hamlet? He says, "Stop. Do not forget, this visitation is but to whet thy almost blunted purpose." That's a nice metaphor to use, to sharpen the sword of your revenge. "But look, amazement on thy mother sits." So step between her and her fighting soul. This is another reaffirmation of the notion that women were weak and needed a man's guidance. It says, "Conceit in weakest body, strongest works." Speak to her, Hamlet. And so what does Hamlet tell his mother about his upcoming trip to England? He says, "I already know that this is not good, that the king is plotting something, that there are not going to be good things that happen. There's letters sealed," it's on 1164, "and my two schoolfellows, whom I will trust as I will adders fanged. An adder is a poisonous snake. They bear the mandate. They must sweep my way and marshal me to knavery." He goes, "Let it work, for 'tis the sport to have the engineer hoist with his own petard," which is one of the sayings that comes out of this, and we really have no idea what hoist with his own petard means, and we'll go over that with the notes and quotes. He says, "But I will delve 1 yard below their minds and blow them at the moon." So he says, I'm going to be even sneakier than they are. And let's see, that takes us to, that's the end of Act 3. So I'm going to open up Act 4 here. Go back over here. The good news is the questions get shorter as you go through. There's less and less questions. I mean, how many questions can you ask about the duel scene in Act 5? Let's be honest. All right, Act 4. How does Claudius find out that Hamlet has killed Polonius? The king goes into the queen's bedchamber, and at the beginning of Act 4, and that's when she tells him. Wait, I'm sorry. Yeah. She goes, "Mad as the sea and wind when both contend, which is the mightier? In his lawless fit, behind the arras, hearing something stir, whips out his rapier, cries a rat, and then this brainish apprehension kills the unseen good old man." What is the king's main concern when he finds out that Polonius has been killed? Well, his main concern is that his liberty is so full that Hamlet is a threat. It goes, "Alas, how shall this bloody deed be answered? It will be laid to us." In other words, Claudius is afraid that they're going to be blaming Gertrude and the king. "It will be laid to us, whose providence should have kept short, restrained, and out of haunt this mad young man." Why haven't they restrained? If he's crazy, why has he been free to wander around the castle? "But so much was our love, we would not understand what was most fit. But like the owner of a foul disease, to keep it from divulging, let it feed even on the pith of life." And so Polonius says, "I will have to go to my wisest friends for advice to make sure that I handle this quite well." Then we get to, who is instructed to bring Polonius's body to the chapel? Well, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. And the other thing that the reason he's deciding to turn to his wisest friends is he's also going to inform them the wisest friend had been Polonius. They've got to have some new ones now since Polonius is dead. So Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are told to bring the body back. In scene 2, what does Hamlet tell Rosencrantz and Guildenstern about the location of Polonius's body? It's one of the few humorous things. He said the body is with the king, but the king is not with the body. The king is a thing. He really doesn't tell them anything, but he does agree, because it helps. The reason he doesn't is it helps reinforce the notion for almost everybody else that he's crazy. On 2, Hamlet agrees to go with them, and he's going to go see the king. And why does Claudius tell his courtiers that Hamlet, mad as he is, must not be confined? He says, Hamlet, this deed for thine especial safety, which we do tender as we dearly grieve, for that which thou hast done must send thee hence with fiery quickness. Therefore prepare thyself. You shall, let's see, I'm sorry, I got off track in my reading. The bark is ready and the wind it helped. Bark in this instance, B-A-R-K, is another term for a boat. And then Hamlet leaves, and he gives that interesting speech about, he says, farewell, mother, to Claudius. And Claudius says, thy loving father, Hamlet. And Hamlet says, my mother. Father and mother is man and wife is one flesh, and so my mother. And so they leave him, and he says, follow him at foot, tempt him with speed aboard on 1167, delay it not, I'll have him hence tonight. Away, for everything is sealed and done, that else leans on the affair, pray you make haste. Everybody leaves the room but the king, and that's when he says, and England, if my love thou holdst at odd, if my great power thereof may give thee sense, since yet thy cicatrice looks raw and red, after the Danish sword, and thy free awe pays homage to us, thou mayest not coldly set our southern process, which imports at full by letters congruing to that effect the present death of Hamlet. Do it, England, for like the hectic in my blood he rages, and thou must cure me, till I know 'tis done, however my haps, my joys were ne'er begun. So he basically says, until Hamlet is dead, I will not be happy. So that's why they don't confine him, because they have to take care of him. And then it switches over. The next scene is very interesting. In scene, I've jumped ahead. Sorry, I was doing scene 3 already. How does Hamlet act when the king asks him about the location he plays around? What does he want the English ruler to do? And do Rosencrantz and Guildenstern know that? They are not present when he says that he wants him killed. For what purpose, scene 4, for what purpose does Fortinbras send his captain to greet Claudius? The captain is there to tell him that it's by his licensure Fortinbras craves the conveyance of a promised march over his kingdom. This goes back earlier, I think to early in Act 2, where the Danes, Claudius has said that Fortinbras can march his army across Denmark to get to Poland. And so this is basically, the captain's going to remind Claudius about that. So and go softly now, it's kind of interesting. And then you have Hamlet. What does Hamlet learn about the Norwegian soldiers when he questions the captain? That's on page 1168. Good sir, whose powers are these? They are of Norway, sir. How purpose, sir, I pray you, against some part of Poland? And that's when we find out that they are actually fighting over a worthless piece of land. And it's kind of interesting that they've already got 2,000 people on the ready to fight for it, and they've spent $20,000 basically dollars for this piece of worthless land. And Hamlet says, "Wow." He says, "How all occasions do inform against me and spur my dull revenge." That's when Hamlet himself actually compares Fortinbras's actions and his own. What is a man if his chief good and market at his time be but to sleep and feed? And that's him describing himself on 1168, left-hand column up to the right one. And basically says, I'm 3 parts of a coward. And then he says, as before he leaves, "Oh, from this time forth my thoughts be bloody or be nothing else." No more excuses about not getting his revenge. So what contrast does Hamlet note between Fortinbras and himself? Fortinbras is a man of action and Hamlet is not. So scene 5 has Gertrude state that she won't see Ophelia. Ophelia's been acting really wacky, really crazy. I will not speak with her. And it makes sense, you know, that would have been very scary. I think when we saw Ophelia in the newer version, she was much crazier. I think there's a soft crazy or madness to the one with Mel Gibson, that's Helena Bonham Carter. It's a very soft one, that it's not as threatening in one sense, whereas the one she's dancing around and singing and, you know, almost acts like she's possessed a little bit. But she changes her mind. What makes her change her mind? That the man says her mood will needs be pitied. And he explains to her she speaks much of her father, says she hears there's tricks in the world and hymns and beats her heart. And then Horatius said, "'Twere good she were spoken with, for she may strew dangerous conjectures and ill-breeding minds." If you don't talk to her, she's going to put out there some things that might be a threat to you and Claudius. So the queen says, "Let her come in." Claudius' theory about why Ophelia is acting so oddly is that conceit upon her father. In other words, she's missing her dad. Is he right? I think it's partially, when you look at her songs, she sings the two songs. She sings the first one to Hamlet, but basically, and if you judge by that song, it probably implies that they have been more than friends, and because of what she says, and that the reason he's rejected her is because they had sex, and he said, "I would have married you if you hadn't come to my bed." So there's some kind of implication with that. And so then she sings the second song, which is to her father, where she cries about how the second song's a little bit later on, when she talks about how there's grass at his head and the stone at his feet. So it's kind of strange. Is he right? Yeah, she's partly right. She has lost those guideposts in her life. The man she loved is gone. He's crazy. He killed her father, and her father is dead. And her brother is gone. There is no one to be her guide. This is a time when when men thought that women needed someone to tell them what to do. Thank you, Queen Elizabeth, for showing that not everybody was that way. But the king basically says, "Oh, this is the poison of deep grief. It springs all from her father's death for Claudius." Why does Laertes return from France? Well, he's gotten the news that his father is dead. And interestingly enough, he's got a group of followers with him. In the movie, both movie versions, we don't really see all the other young men. But they've actually come, this group of young men, to depose the king and put Laertes on the throne. Why does Claudius figure he has to placate Laertes? Because he's got all these guys with him. You know, and what do Laertes' followers want for Laertes? They want him to be king. So, you know, Claudius has got to do something. And basically says to him that if you truly want revenge, I'll help you get it. And then that's when Ophelia comes in, and you get the second song about, "No, he is dead. Go to thy deathbed, he will never come again." So you get the second song. Interestingly enough, there's one reference in here that's kind of interesting. Laertes on page 1172 says, when he says, you know, he says, "I'll open up my arms wide." And to his good friends, those who are the friends of his father, he will open up his arms wide. And he says, "And like the kind life-rendering pelican, repass them with my blood." There was a belief that pelicans fed their young from their blood of their chest. And this was something that the monarch in England at the time believed. I didn't give you a lot of social background. I should have, but I didn't. Believed that the king or the queen nurtured, their lifeblood nurtured the country. And so there's some references to that. And Shakespeare is always deep down, somewhere in his stories, his plays, dramas, is trying to reinforce that the person on the throne is the correct person to be on the throne in England. Okay. So we get we do not get what we got in the movie. It was Hamlet sneaking into the on the vessel and stealing the letters from Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. What we get is a letter that a sailor delivers to Horatio that says, that tells Horatio basically what has happened. He says that pirates, how interesting, that pirates attacked the ship that Hamlet's on, and so he basically finds himself, they were grappled with, and he jumps over to the pirate ship. And so he became their prisoner, and they dealt with him with mercy, and he convinced them, apparently Hamlet is the most charming man in the world. He convinces these pirates to take him back to shore and to deliver letters, one to the king and one to Horatio. So the king is aware that Hamlet, when we don't get that in most of the movie versions, that the king has gotten this letter, he knows Hamlet's alive. He knows that Hamlet's coming back. It's like, I'm going to warn you, I'm going to be upfront about all this of a sudden. So Hamlet gets back to Denmark because the ship, the pirates put him on land, and one of the pirates kind of travels with him, okay? And how does Horatio find Hamlet? They meet. And which doesn't explain it. In the movie, all of a sudden you have Hamlet on a boat, and then you have Hamlet and Horatio riding horses together. They totally omit that in the movie, which is kind of strange that they did that. And that's also when you find out about Rosencrantz and Guildenstern hold their course for England, and he'll tell Horatio more about that. Then we switch to scene 7. What 2 reasons does Claudius give Laertes for failing to apprehend Hamlet? He goes, it begins in line 10. Oh, for 2 special reasons, which may to you perhaps seem much unsinewed, but yet to me they're strong. So this is where you guys told me that Claudius didn't love Gertrude in that Act 5 questions. This is where you lost 1 or 2 points. The queen, his mother, lives also almost by his looks, and for myself, my virtue or my plague, be it either which, she is so conjunctive to my life and soul that as the star moves not but in his sphere, I could not but by her. That if she is his star that he travels by, that does not mean that he was willing to let her die so he could, and marry somebody else later on. So the first one is, the second reason is that Hamlet is so dadgum popular with everybody. Is the great love, it's on the top of the right-hand column, about line 19. Why to a public count I might not go is the great love the general gender bear him, who dipping all his faults in their affection, work like the spring that turns wood to stone, convert his guides to graces, so that my arrows too slightly timbered for so loud a wind would have reverted to my bow again, but not where I had aimed them. So it would be pointless to attempt to kill or to punish Hamlet for Polonius's death. How does Claudius learn that Hamlet is back in Denmark? Well, he's delivered a letter from, the messenger brings a letter right here in the end of the scene. Sailors, my lord, they say, I saw them not. They were given me by Claudio. And so he reads it. He goes, and you can see on the bottom right-hand column, 1174, high and mighty, you shall know I am set naked on your kingdom. Tomorrow shall I beg leave to see your kingly eyes, when I shall, first asking your pardon, thereunto recount the occasion of my sudden and more strange return, Hamlet. So he writes him a letter and tells him he's coming back. So what is the king's original plan to kill Hamlet? And I kind of let you fudge on this. The original plan is for Laertes to have a non-blunted rapier. In other words, it would be sharp. The whole point of the practice duel is to show your skills, not to kill the opponent. And the king says, where does he say that at? I'm flipping over here. He goes, this will be on page 1176 to 1177. Actually, 1177. He goes, it's talking about the duel. We'll put on those shall praise your excellence and set a double varnish on the fame the Frenchman gave you. Bring you in fine together and wager on your heads. He, being remiss, most generous, and free from all contriving, will not peruse the foils, so that with ease or with a little shuffling, you may choose a sword unbaited, and in a passive practice requite him for your father. So you could accidentally kill him because your sword wasn't. They have little balls, little round things they put on the end so that you can't stab through somebody. But he says, we'll trick that out. And that's when Laertes says, I'll do it, and for that purpose, I'll anoint my sword. I bought an unction of a mountebank, so mortal that, but a dip in it, a knife in it, where it draws blood, no cataplasm so rare, collected from all simples that have virtues under the moon, can save the thing from death. So Laertes adds the poison to the sword. And the king says, by the way, and this keeps going on. Oh, that should be a loan, not a lawn. Huh. How do they intend to make triply sure that Hamlet dies? By putting the poison pearl in the cup. And how does Ophelia die? That's where we get that nice speech about how she was sitting on the branch of a brook, and it broke, and she fell in the water, and she continued to sing her songs, but the garments weighed down, strangled her. Now, I'm struck by, if somebody's watching this, why didn't they jump in and save her? If somebody could tell the story of her singing the songs, it's kind of crazy. All right, and that ends Act 4, I believe. Yeah, so Act 5 is the next one. I got to open that up. Let's see here. Takes a second to get to them. And there are not many questions at all on Act 5. I mean, how do they fight the duel? With swords, But you do have the two scenes is what you've got. You have the first scene of the grave digging. And I find it odd that our textbook calls them clowns, but... And it's a case of... I had a student in my face-to-face class send me an email like at 9 o'clock last night saying, guess what, I was sharing the book with somebody else and now they can no longer share it with me, so I don't know if I'm going to get the paper done. I found a free copy of Hamlet online, There are ways to find stuff if you look hard enough. All right, so scene 1, we've got the clowns. Whose grave are the men digging? And that's where you have one of the few humorous scenes, and what happens is the guys are sitting there digging the grave, and it is a Christian burial, but they're not so excited about it because he says it must be se offendendo. It cannot be else, for here lies the point. If I drown myself wittingly, it argues an act, and suicide was against the rules of the church for being buried in sacred ground. And so they have this conversation about that. And then the first clown, or gravedigger, sends the second gravedigger to go get some alcohol. That certainly could make the job easier. And that actually occurs on 1179. He says, cudgel thy brains no more about it, for your dull ass will not mend his pace with beating. And when you are asked this question next, say, a grave maker, the houses that he makes last till doomsday. Go get thee in and fetch me a stoup of liquor. And then he sings a song, and that's when Hamlet shows up. And how long has the second gravedigger been in the business? Since the birth of Hamlet. I always thought that was kind of cool. That he's been at this long, but he has no clue what the Hamlet looks like, so it's kind of crazy. Oh, and so in the textbook, the pictures of Billy Crystal, that's from the Kenneth Branagh version. And let's go back over here. The second gravedigger's been in business for at least 30 years. And whose skull does Hamlet hold up? It's the skull of Yorick, the court jester. And Hamlet tells him that these are lips I used to kiss. Well, that was when Hamlet was a child. We find out the guy's been dead about 23 years. That's how long the body's been in the ground. And that he used to play and jump with him, and when you said, I used to kiss these lips and he's holding the skull, it's this very gross image because we see an adult man talking to the skull. But if you remember, it's a small, it's a 6-7-year-old kid. It's a whole different story. I kiss my grandsons on the lips, 4 and 8 years old, Probably not much longer for the 8-year-old, but that's one of those deals. So it's kind of a quirky, strange thing. There's also, in Hamlet, we didn't get hardly any of this in the either movie version, but where the whole notion about how the body decays, it comes out quite a bit in Hamlet, Macbeth, Lear, that how our bodies decay and what happens to us, which reinforces Hamlet's whole notion that he is about death. When you die, then you've got to worry about what happens to your body. Then you get the funny thing about how that it's a woman, all this stuff. Let's see. Then you get Laertes fussing with the priest. Laertes, why does he complain to the priest? Because he doesn't think there's enough ceremony for Ophelia's death. And the priest says, well, I'm not doing it. We should profane the service of the dead. No more be done. We should profane the service of the dead to sing a requiem and such rest to her as to peace departed soul. So there's this whole notion that she's denied the complete services, that only the fact that the king has said she gets this service at all is why they're having it. Hamlet steps out from the place where he and Horatio have been watching. That's when you get this wonderful verbal battle. Oh, I love her more than 40,000 brothers, and they're fighting over the dead body of Ophelia. It's kind of not a great scene. And that's when he says, Swounds, show me what thou'lt do. Would weep, would fight, would fast, would tear thyself, would drink of Isol, eat a crocodile? I'll do it. And all of a sudden, here at the end of the play, after she's dead, then we get the whole notion that maybe Hamlet really did love her. And we find out that the queen had hoped that Ophelia would marry her son. So the only people who believed that Hamlet would not marry Ophelia were her family. And she readily believed them. So she was wrong. So Polonius and Laertes were incorrect. How had Hamlet discovered Claudius' orders to have Hamlet beheaded? He actually read the letter. This is in the first part of scene 2 in Act 5, where he says, I actually read it and saw their grand commission, where I found Horatio, an exact command larded with many several sorts of reasons on page 1184, importing Denmark south and England too, that my head should be struck off. And how did Hamlet see to it that Rosencrantz and Guildenstern would be put to death instead of himself? He put in letters saying to do that to the people bearing the letters. So there's this wonderful irony, well, it's not wonderful, not for Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, that because they are so unwitting, because they don't think about what they're doing, these are two kind of clueless guys. This is Dumb and Dumber. And, they've gotten involved in palace politics, and it's led to their death. That they actually carry a letter that says, kill the bearer of the letter. You got to be pretty stupid to have that happen. So, and it just so happens that Hamlet happened to have a ring that he could seal the letter with, so it looked like the king had done it. Does he feel guilty about it? He says, no, I don't. They deserved it because they were going to take me to my death. Their defeat does by their own insinuation grow. 'Tis dangerous when the baser nature comes between the past and fell insensate points of mighty opposites. So that's what happens. What message does Osric bring to Hamlet from the king? He brings a message that he wants to set up a wager for a practice bout between Hamlet and Laertes to prove who's the better. And there's these big wagers being placed. The king's got 6 Barbary horses that Hamlet will indeed, how does it say? I'm trying to think how many touches. It's something like not half of the touches will land on Hamlet or something along those lines. And Hamlet is, Laertes is wagering blades and their scabbards that go with them, but they use a different term for it. I think they use the term carriage, what carries them. And by wagering on Hamlet, the king is reinforcing the whole notion that he's on his side, that they're good buds. I would wager against him if I didn't like my stepson. And why does the king place the pearl in the cup? Just that reinforcement. He's using it to show reward for whoever gets the first touch gets the cup. And so, obviously, he's got it. Well, he takes the drink of the cup, puts the pearl in after the first touch, and then offers it to Hamlet. And Hamlet says, no, I'm not going to drink from the cup. Then Gertrude obviously does, and she dies from the poison. So only a Laertes foil with sharpened poison tips, so how does Laertes get mortally wounded? Well, what happens is that when he illegally cuts Hamlet, they wrestle. And in that wrestling moment, that's when the foils get switched. And so when Hamlet, I guess, dings or touches Laertes with the sword, he gets the poison in him. And so what does he say before he dies? He goes, I am so sorry, forgive me. I didn't mean to do it. And by the way, your uncle planned it. The king's to blame. It's on page 1191. The king's to blame. Thy mother's poison I can no more. The point in venom too, then venom to thy work. He stabs the king. How does Claudius die? He gets stabbed with the sword. He also has the poison poured down his throat. And then you have this scene that some put in and some don't, where Horatio says, Hamlet says, I'm dead, Horatio. Wretched queen ado, you look pale and tremble at this chance. He's talking to Horatio. He goes, report me and my cause of right to the unsatisfied. And Horatio says, never believe it. I am more an antique Roman than a Dane. He goes, here's yet some liquor left. He says, I want to die with you. He says, I'm going to die with my friend. Come on in. My next guys are here, and it doesn't matter. They're a little bit early. I'm going to die with my friend. And Hamlet goes, no, you can't do that. If you die with me, then nobody knows the true story about what happened. And then his dying wishes are, he says, what he can hear troops marching, and in the Kenneth Branagh version, they're actually marching into the castle, which I think is kind of cool. Osric tells him it's young Fortinbras, and Hamlet says, but I do prophesy the election lights on Fortinbras. He will be the next king of Denmark. And so that's Hamlet's request. And then you have Horatio saying, good night, good night, sweet prince, and flights of angels, sing thee to thy rest. And Fortinbras sings. Ooh, got a little violent there with my motion. And then you hear the talk about that. And basically, that's the rest of the questions on the acts, okay? So Wednesday, we're going to go over the notes and quotes pages. And my best advice to you is that you watch the Kenneth Branagh version of the movie, because it's got everything in it. And it's pretty much in order. He does a good job of following it. And so that's all I've got for today, all right? Let me flip up here. Come over here. Okay. Just reading mail. Anyway, that's what is going on so far. Any questions for me? Okay. We're cool. So, how's it going, Jerry? Oh, you didn't want to sit up there?
Well, I mean, like, my head will get in the camera.
You know. They're not used to seeing anybody but me in the room, so what can we say? And the red dot means it's being recorded, so. Is everybody present today? Because if they are, I won't bother to put the link on. But if somebody's absent, is anybody absent? When they give me the link, I can put it on. Everybody's there? Okay. That's good. Somebody? Oh, let me just do it later. Well, I might need it for my 9 o'clock class.
Miss Thompson,
Yes.
will you post it anyways, just in case we need to go over those questions again?
Because we did go over them quickly, didn't we? Yeah. I'll post it anyway then.
Thank you.
Okay. And just realize that there's that good 5 or 6 minutes up front. They start recording about 7:58. So I'm sitting in here and I can see the red dot and I'm like, hi, how's it going? I'm still trying to get things up. Yeah, at one point in time I would type things in Word and say, this is today's lesson, but it's too much trouble. So anyway, so I'm looking forward to reading your papers. What can I say? It's that time. Did I get yours? That's not a good grin. Did I get it?
Yeah.
Okay. You had me scared there.
I'd be scared too.
But you got it done? Okay.
I was trying to think of like a creative title, things in my like.
You know, that's why some professors get really hung up on titles, and I'm not nearly, just say Hamlet and Death, Hamlet, Prince of Denmark, research paper. It's not the best title, but.
I like the title, just like old words that I should have changed.
Don't obsess about it. It's probably not going to affect your grade. Speaking of which, the research paper you did last semester, I actually used it as a sample in my 1301 class. I took your name off of it. Okay. But just to let you know, I did do that, okay?
Really good research paper.
I thought it was. That's why I did it. Oh, this is not good.
What?
I got 13 papers. 13 papers out of this class. Wow.
No.
Well, interestingly enough, I got yours and Jenna's. No, this is not good. Not good at all. Well, the easiest way to do it, let me go over here to Full Grade Center. Oh, that means I was missing 3 papers in that class.
So did Tori drop?
She did not drop. I never heard from her. So, I guess you're gonna ask, that's all I can do. I had to hear from her. I didn't, because I hesitated to drop her. She was doing okay, but I thought
She
she was,
stopped coming and
yeah. Okay.
I just feel so bad.
Yeah, I've got to do this email. No, I had one girl from there, on there, who has not turned in several things, and I get a message from her last week. Oh, I'm so sorry, things have gone on, is there any extra credit I can do? I'm not giving extra credit.
Yeah.
This is college, this is not high school. And so, and actually there's several at this one school that are not doing well. And so I even heard from the counselor, so I emailed back, and I emailed this morning and said, hey, she didn't turn her paper in on time.
Yeah.
So they're aware of it. I mean, okay, let's see who else has it. How many people are in this class? I can't ever remember this class. Several didn't turn it in from New Deal.
New Deal's a big class.
Not as big as it was last year. I had 20